Let me ask you something. Have you ever done the hardest thing of your life, and I mean the absolute hardest, only to look up and find the one person who was supposed to be there just wasn't? Yeah, because this story starts exactly there. I'm Ray Whitmore, husband, or I was until the cancer took June. Father, contractor for 31 years. And for the last 3 of those years, quietly and then not so quietly, an alcoholic. That's the word. I'm not going to dress it up. I'm also 61 years old, standing outside a recovery center in January, and the person who was supposed to pick me up isn't here. We will get to that. But before we do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing, and it means everything to us. Hit the like button while you're at it, and drop your thoughts in the comments after listening. You are going to love it here. Cold the way January gets in the Midwest. Not stormy, just a quiet, steady cold that settles into your coat and stays there. The kind of cold that doesn't argue with you. It just reminds you, calmly and without apology, that it existed long before you and will be here long after. Cedar Brook Recovery Center handed me a manila envelope at 10:58 in the morning and wished me well. I stood in that lobby and looked inside like I was checking for something I already knew wasn't there. My wallet, cracked brown leather, bought by my daughter Sylvie 4 Father's Days ago, back when Father's Day still felt like an occasion worth dressing up for. My house keys, a phone that had been dead since week 2 and had absolutely no plans to change that, and $43. 3 tens, a 5, 6 singles, and some coins I didn't count because counting them felt like the saddest thing a grown man could do on a Thursday morning in January. $43. 6 weeks of the hardest work of my life, and that's what waited on the other side. I want you to understand what those 6 weeks actually were, because this isn't a story about a man who checked into a comfortable facility, ate decent food, did a little journaling, and walked out fixed. That is not what happened. What happened was I sweated through sheets so completely soaked that night nurses changed them twice before sunrise. Quietly, without being asked, without making me feel worse than I already did. What happened was I sat in circles with men who wept openly for sons they'd missed growing up, for Little League games, for graduations, for ordinary Tuesday dinners that couldn't be recovered no matter how sorry you were. I didn't judge a single one of them because I understood every syllable of that grief personally. And what happened, what really happened, was that I finally talked about June, my June, her laugh which always started silent, shoulders shaking first, the sound arriving a beat late, like it had traveled a distance to reach the room. The way she made coffee every single morning like it was a small ceremony worth performing with care. The way our house changed after we buried her, not just empty but altered like the air itself had been quietly reformulated, and nobody thought to warn me. I talked about how the drinking started as grief and became architecture, how somewhere along the way it stopped being about missing June and became about not knowing how to live in the house she had left. How a man can go from, I just need to take the edge off, to I cannot function without this, so gradually that by the time he notices, the distance back looks impossible. I did the work, every raw, humiliating, sacred inch of it, so you'll understand why standing in that lobby at 11 o'clock on a Thursday in January, watching the automatic doors slide open and shut in the cold, and not seeing Sylvie's car in that parking lot, hit differently than it might sound. I checked the clock. 11:06, then 11:44. She knew, had known for 2 full weeks. Discharge was at 11. I had reminded her in our last phone call, 9 days ago, the call where her voice had that quality it sometimes got. Distracted, slightly far away, like she was present in the room but facing a different direction entirely. And I had heard Craig in the background, hadn't seen him, didn't need to. Just his voice, low, measured, controlled. The voice of a man who always knew exactly what he was doing, and more importantly, exactly what everyone around him was about to do next. I'll be there, Dad, I promise. Right. I watched a young man, couldn't have been older than 24, get picked up by his mother who was crying before she even cleared the door. She grabbed his face in both hands and just held it, like she was memorizing him, like she had been rehearsing that exact moment for 6 weeks and wasn't going to rush a single second of it. I watched a woman around my age walk out alone, same manila envelope under her arm, same expression I probably had, the one that's trying very hard not to be what it is. Our eyes met for exactly 1 second, We understood each other completely without saying a word. Then a cab pulled up for her, and she was gone. No cab for me. Dead phone. $43. January. At 11:51, I stood up, tucked the envelope under my arm, and walked outside. The cold hit me clean and immediate. 4 blocks east was the bus stop. I knew this because 3 weeks earlier, at 10 o'clock at night, on a shared computer in Cedar Brook's rec room, some quiet and unsentimental part of me had looked it up. I hadn't admitted to myself why at the time. Standing on that sidewalk, I admitted it now. I started walking. I made it exactly 12 steps. Ray Whitmore. Not a question. A statement. Delivered like the man behind me had been holding it ready. I turned around. He was around 40, broad-shouldered, charcoal wool coat that fit the way things fit when they're chosen deliberately and not just grabbed off a rack. Dark hair, cut close. The kind of steady eyes that suggested he had been in difficult rooms and had not been the one who blinked first. And I knew that face. The way you know a song before the words come back. The melody arriving first, the rest following slowly behind. Noah Cole. Except the Noah Cole I remembered had been 20, 2 years old with a split lip, a garbage bag for luggage, and the particular exhausted look of a young man who had used up every last option he had and was one bad night away from something permanent. He had slept on my couch for 6 weeks in the winter of 1997. June had made up the bed with the good sheets, the ones reserved for guests she actually wanted to make feel at home. And she had cooked enough dinner for 3 every single night, without being asked, and without once making him feel like a burden. Because that was June. That was exactly, precisely, completely who she was. The man standing in front of me now looked like he hadn't lost a case in years, possibly ever. "Noah," I said. It came out barely a word. He smiled, crooked on the left, same as always. "You look good, Ray. Better than I expected, if I'm being straight with you." "How long have you been here?" "About 45 minutes. I stared at him. "It's January, Noah." "I brought coffee," he said, completely unbothered, reaching into his coat and producing a thermos. "Yours is black," I remembered. I took it, because what else do you do when a man you haven't seen in 27 years shows up in a January parking lot with your coffee order memorized? We stood there for a moment, 2 men, 2 decades of silence, a wind that had no interest in either of us, and I felt something shift in my chest, not dramatically, not the way things shift in movies, just quietly, the way a door settles when someone finally closes it the right way. "She's gone," I said. He would know who I meant. "I know," Noah said. "I'm sorry I wasn't there." We let that sit for a moment, gave it the space it deserved. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a phone, brand new, still in the sleeve. Charged and ready. "Got it last week." "Last week," I repeated slowly. "You planned this." "I've been planning this," he said, his voice dropping just slightly, since Craig Weston came into the picture. And there it was, said plainly. No drama, no build-up, just Craig's name, in a parking lot in January, from a man I hadn't seen in over 2 decades. Landing exactly the way a name lands when you've been half expecting someone to finally say it out loud. What did he do, Noah? Not a question this time either. I had apparently picked that up from him. He looked at me for a long moment, measuring something. Not my weakness. I'd already proven I could handle weakness. He was measuring my readiness. "Get in the car, Ray," he said quietly. "There's something you need to see, and I need you to hear all of it before you react." Before you react? I almost smiled. Almost. Because here's what 42 days of real serious therapy actually teaches you. It doesn't make you calm. It doesn't sand down your edges or turn you into someone who responds to betrayal with a deep breath and a gratitude journal. What it does is teach you that in the space between feeling something and doing something, there is a choice. And that choice is the only thing that separates the man you were from the man you're trying to become. I got in the car. Noah placed a folder on the console between us. Thick, tabbed. Organized with the quiet precision of a man who had been constructing something carefully and for a long time. The folder of a man who knew exactly what he was doing when he put it together and exactly what it was going to do when someone else opened it. He turned to the first page. "Craig filed a power of attorney 7 weeks ago," he said. 3 days before you checked into Cedar Brook. The words arrived one at a time. He's been moving money since week 1. Methodically. The kind of methodical that tells you this wasn't impulsive, Ray. This was planned. Possibly before June passed. Possibly long before. I looked at the documents. At my own signature, or something engineered to look exactly like it. At account numbers I'd carried for 30 years. At transfer dates arranged like a timeline of quiet, deliberate theft. Sylvie, I said. Doesn't know, Noah said. He's managed her completely. Ray. He paused, and I could tell this next part had been sitting with him. She didn't choose not to come today. She was told you called, that you said you weren't ready to leave, that you needed more time. I sat with that. My daughter had not abandoned me. She had been lied to, cleanly, confidently, without hesitation, by the man she trusted most in the world. The man who had looked me in the eye at their wedding, shaken my hand firmly, and said, "I'll take care of her, Ray. You have my word." I looked back through the windshield at Cedarbrook, at those automatic doors still sliding open and shut in the January cold, at the empty parking spot where Sylvie's car should have been, where she had probably wanted to be, where she would have been if the man she married hadn't decided that Ray Whitmore was easier to rob when Ray Whitmore was out of the way. And right there, in that front seat, with a folder full of my own stolen life open on the console beside me, and a thermos of black coffee warming my hands, I made a decision. No confrontation, no phone calls, no showing up at my own front door with documents and accusations, watching Craig straighten his tie and talk his way through it, while Sylvie stood in the kitchen trying to figure out which version of the story felt true. No. Craig Weston was going to go on believing he had already won. He was going to get comfortable, sloppy, bold in the way men get bold when they think the threat has been eliminated, and then, quietly, methodically, with the patience of a man who had just spent 42 days learning how to wait, Ray Whitmore was going to take back everything. Every single dollar, every single piece. And the last thing Craig Weston would ever see coming was the man he left stranded in a parking lot with $43 and a dead phone, because that man just got in the car. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. Thank you for real. Here's something nobody tells you about revenge. The good kind. The kind that actually means something. Doesn't look anything like what you see in the movies. There's no dramatic confrontation, no table flipping, no moment where you burst through a door and say exactly the right thing, at exactly the right volume. The good kind is quiet. The good kind looks from the outside like absolutely nothing at all. And that is precisely what makes it devastating. Noah had a place for me. A one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Columbus. Nothing fancy, nothing memorable. Exactly the kind of building you drive past every day without registering. Beige walls, decent heat, a window that looked out onto a parking lot that was not Cedarbrook's. He had stocked the refrigerator with enough food for 2 weeks and left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter that said simply, "Don't contact Sylvie yet. Trust the process. I'll be in touch by Friday." I stood in that kitchen on a Thursday afternoon in January, with a thermos of cold coffee and a folder full of evidence that my son-in-law had been dismantling my life with the calm efficiency of a man doing yard work. And I made myself a sandwich. Turkey, mustard, wheat bread, because that's what you do when the alternative is picking up a phone and saying something you can't take back. I ate the sandwich. I looked out the window. I thought about June the way I always did when things got unbearably still. Not with the drowning grief of before, but with something quieter now. Something that felt cautiously and for the first time like gratitude. She would have known exactly what to do, I thought. She always did. Then I went to bed at 9 o'clock, like a man with a plan and a bedtime. Craig Weston, meanwhile, had absolutely no idea. And that was the most important thing. Noah had been precise about this from the beginning. The moment Craig knows you're out, and you know what he did, he'd told me in the car, he lawyers up, moves the remaining assets, and we spend the next 3 years in litigation while he lives in your house and sleeps in your daughter's bed. We cannot tip our hand. Not yet. Not even close to yet. So as far as Craig knew, Ray Whitmore had walked out of Cedarbrook on a Thursday morning, found no ride waiting, and had quietly disappeared into whatever sad, diminished life awaited a broke, recently rehabbed 61-year-old, with no resources and no plan. Which, to be fair, was a completely reasonable thing for Craig to assume, because that's who Craig thought I was. That was his one fatal mistake, and I was going to let him live inside it for as long as it took. Noah called Friday morning at 8:15 sharp. "How'd you sleep?" "Like a man who doesn't drink anymore," I said, which is either very well or not at all. depending on the night. He laughed, short and genuine. We need to talk about the financial picture. All of it. Can you come to my office Monday morning? Noah, I said. I have $43 and no car. Ray, he said. I have a driver. Of course he did. His office was downtown, 14th floor. The kind of office that doesn't need to announce itself because everything in it already has. The view, the furniture, the particular quality of silence that exists in rooms where serious things get decided. His name was on the door in clean silver letters, Noah Cole, attorney at law. I stood in the hallway and looked at it for a moment longer than necessary. In 1997, this man had owned one pair of jeans and a library card. June, I thought. You should see this. His assistant, a composed young woman named Diane, who had the energy of someone who had seen everything and was impressed by none of it, brought coffee without being asked, and set a fresh legal pad in front of me like she already knew I was going to need it. Noah sat across from me and opened a second folder, thicker than the first. All right, he said. Here's where we are. What followed was 45 minutes of information, delivered in the calm, methodical tone of a man who had learned long ago that the facts were damaging enough without any additional dramatics. Craig had forged the power of attorney using a notary who Noah had already discovered had lost his license in another county 2 years prior and was currently operating illegally. 3 of my accounts had been drained completely. A fourth, a savings account June and I had opened in 1989, the one we'd called the someday account because we were always going to do something meaningful with it someday, had been reduced to $11. $11. From 44,000. I looked at that number on the page for a long time without saying anything. There's more, Noah said, and his voice shifted just slightly, not softer exactly, but more deliberate. The way a doctor's voice shifts before the part of the diagnosis that requires your full attention. Craig has done this before. I looked up. His first marriage. Her name was Donna. Her father was a retired teacher named Walter Briggs, 73 years old, widower, living alone in Dayton. Craig married Donna in 2009, had power of attorney over Walter within a year, and had drained his accounts by 2012. Walter never recovered financially. He passed away in 2019. The room was very quiet. Donna divorced Craig in 2013, Noah continued. She didn't press charges because Craig had convinced her that Walter had approved every transaction. By the time she found out the truth, the money was gone, and the paper trail had been managed. Managed. The word sat in the room like something with weight. He's a professional, I said. He's practiced, Noah said. There's a difference. A professional is good at what they do. Craig is good at who he chooses. He paused. He chooses people who are grieving, people who are distracted, people who have someone who loves them enough to trust the person that person chose. I thought about Sylvie, about how she had looked at Craig on their wedding day, not the starry-eyed look of a young woman in a movie, but something quieter and more adult than that. The look of a woman who had lost her mother young and her father slowly, and had finally found something that felt stable. Craig had seen that look and chosen her for it. That thought sat in my chest like a stone. What about Walter's daughter? I said. Donna. Noah allowed himself a small, precise smile. I spoke with Donna Briggs 3 weeks ago. She's been waiting 7 years for someone to call her. Now, here is where I need you to stay with me, because this is the part of the story where nothing appears to be happening, and that appearance is completely intentional. Ray Whitmore did not confront Craig Weston in week 2. Ray Whitmore did not call Sylvie in week 3. Ray Whitmore did not appear at Craig's office, or show up at his gym, or arrange any kind of dramatic encounter that would have felt deeply satisfying in the moment, and completely destroyed everything Noah was building. What Ray Whitmore did was disappear. Completely. Quietly. Like smoke. And Craig Weston, who had expected at minimum a phone call full of accusations he could calmly deflect, got silence instead. And silence for a man like Craig was unsettling in a way that accusations never could be. Because accusations you can answer, silence you can only wait out. I heard through Noah's quiet channels that Craig had told Sylvie her father had probably relapsed, that it was sad but not surprising, that some people simply couldn't sustain recovery. He had said it gently, with the practiced sorrow of a man performing concern for an audience of one, and Sylvie had cried in the kitchen on a Sunday night, while Craig rubbed her back and said, "I know, sweetheart, I know." I heard that, and I sat with it in my beige apartment, and I did not call her. Because Noah had said not yet, and Noah had 14 years and a name on a 14th floor door, and a woman named Donna Briggs in Dayton who had been waiting 7 years. And I trusted him the way you trust someone who once had nothing and built everything, carefully, deliberately, one brick at a time. But here's what Craig didn't know. Here's what was happening while Ray Whitmore was being quiet. Noah had filed 3 separate motions in 2 different courts, each one surgical, each one designed to do exactly one thing without appearing connected to the others. A title search had revealed something in the property records that made Noah set down his coffee cup and sit very still for a full minute before picking up his phone to call me. "Ray," he said, "do you remember a piece of land on the east side, corner of Maple and Route 9? About 2.5 acres? I thought about it. June's father left that to us. We never did anything with it." "Craig doesn't know you own it," Noah said. "Why does that matter?" A pause. The particular kind of pause that precedes information that changes everything. "Because Craig's entire development project, the one he's been using your money to fund, is built on a title assumption that falls apart the moment that deed surfaces." I sat down slowly. "His lawyers missed it," Noah said, and I could hear it in his voice now. That controlled, careful, deeply professional satisfaction of a man watching something he built from scratch begin to work exactly as designed. The entire project. "Ray, it's sitting on a foundation that legally doesn't exist without your signature." I looked out the window of my beige apartment at the parking lot below. Somewhere across town, Craig Weston was having dinner in my daughter's house, sleeping well, believing he had won. Let him, I thought. Let him enjoy every last second of it. Because the thing about disappearing completely, the thing Craig never understood and never would, is that a ghost doesn't haunt you by making noise. A ghost haunts you by being everywhere you look the moment you finally realize it was there all along. There's a moment in every man's life where he gets to decide who he finally is, not who he was, not who he almost became, not the version of himself that grief built or addiction hollowed out, or betrayal tried to bury in a parking lot with $43 and a dead phone. Who he finally, completely, irreversibly is. Mine came on a Wednesday night in March, and I was dressed for it. Noah had said, 2 weeks prior, sitting across from me in that 14th floor office with his sleeves rolled up and 3 empty coffee cups between us, "The city council meets the 3rd Wednesday of every month. Craig attends every single one. He's been pushing his development permits through committee for 6 months. This month, this particular meeting, he's expecting final approval." He slid a document across the desk. "He's expecting it," Noah said, "because he has no idea that we filed a title objection with the county recorder's office 11 days ago. And he has no idea that the objection is valid. And he has no idea." Noah paused, and allowed himself the smallest smile I had ever seen on a man's face, the kind that costs something to suppress. "That the man whose signature is required to resolve it is not only alive and well, but has been sitting quietly in a beige apartment on the east side for the last 6 weeks waiting for exactly this moment." "He'll be there," I said. "Front row," Noah said. "He always sits front row." I nodded slowly. "What do I do?" "Nothing," Noah said. "You sit in the back, you let him see you. That's all." 2 words that carried the weight of everything. I bought a new coat. Nothing extravagant. I was a 61-year-old contractor from Columbus. Not a man auditioning for a magazine. But it was good wool, charcoal gray, and it fit properly. And when I looked in the mirror of that beige apartment on the Wednesday evening in March, I saw something I had not seen in a very long time. I saw Ray Whitmore. Not the man who had been quietly disappearing for 3 years inside a bottle. Not the man who had stood in a parking lot in January with a dead phone and coins he couldn't bring himself to count. Not the ghost of the man June had married. Ray Whitmore. Whole. Clear-eyed. Present. "You look good," I told the mirror. The mirror, for once, agreed. I picked up my coffee, black, in a thermos, because some things become ritual, and ritual becomes identity. And I walked out the door. The city council meeting was held in the Riverside Community Center on Broad Street. Parking lot half full. Fluorescent lights. Rows of fold-in chairs and a long table at the front where 6 council members sat with water glasses, and the specific expressions of people performing civic duty on a Wednesday night. I arrived at 7:14. The meeting had started at 7. I pushed open the back door quietly and stepped inside. The room held maybe 60 people, local business owners, residents, a few men in suits toward the front who had the posture of people who needed something approved. And there, front row, center seat, in a charcoal blazer that probably cost more than my first truck, was Craig Weston. He was leaning slightly forward, elbows on knees, talking quietly to the man beside him with the easy confidence of someone who already knew how the evening was going to go. His hair was perfect. His shoes were perfect. Everything about Craig Weston was always, always perfect. I found a seat in the last row, corner. I set my thermos on my knee and I watched him. For 3 full minutes, I just watched. And then, the way you sometimes feel eyes on you in a room, the way you feel weather changing, Craig Weston went still. His head turned slowly, the way heads turn when the body knows something before the mind catches up. His eyes found me across that room like they had no other choice. And Craig Weston's face, that perfectly composed, carefully constructed, always prepared face, went the color of February. I didn't move. I didn't nod, didn't raise my coffee, didn't smile or point, or make any gesture that could be read as a threat or a greeting. I just looked at him. The way a man looks when he's been somewhere and come back. The way a man looks when he knows something. Craig turned back to the front of the room. I watched his jaw tighten, watched him say something brief to the man beside him, watched his right hand resting on his knee, close slowly into a fist and then, deliberately, open again. There it is, I thought. There's the crack. The development permit came up at 7:41. The council chairwoman, a steady woman named Patricia Owens, who had clearly run 10,000 of these meetings and had patience for exactly none of the drama, read the item number and asked if there were any outstanding objections before the committee moved to vote. Noah stood up from 3 rows behind Craig. Craig heard the movement, turned, and whatever color had returned to his face in the last 20 minutes left again immediately, and did not come back. Patricia, Noah said, calm as a man ordering breakfast. Noah Cole, counsel for Ray Whitmore. We filed a title objection with the county recorder 11 days ago regarding parcel 4471B, which comprises approximately 2.5 acres at the corner of Maple and Route 9. That parcel is the foundational title assumption for the entire Weston development project, currently before this committee. The deed has been in continuous ownership by the Whitmore family since 1987 and was never transferred, never sold, and never legally encumbered. We have the original documentation here for the record. He set a bound document on the council table, with the quiet authority of a man placing the last piece of a puzzle he had been building for months. The room shifted, the way rooms shift when something real enters them. Patricia Owens looked at the document, looked at her colleagues, looked at Craig Weston, who was sitting in the front row, looking at nothing, his perfect face doing something it had probably never been asked to do before. Absolutely nothing, Mr. Weston, Patricia said. Were you aware of this title issue? The pause that followed lasted 4 seconds. I counted. I'll need to consult with my attorneys, Craig said. Of course, Patricia said. We'll table the item pending resolution. She moved on to the next agenda item with the efficiency of a woman who had seen men like Craig Weston before, and would see them again and was not particularly moved by any of it. Just like that. No explosion, no handcuffs, no dramatic speech, just a bound document on a table and a permit that would never be approved. Craig's entire project, the one built with my money, on a title assumption his lawyers had missed, funded by theft from a man he had left in a parking lot in January, tabled, suspended, legally paralyzed. I picked up my thermos and stood up quietly and walked out the back door before Craig could collect himself enough to follow. 3 weeks later, Craig Weston was served. Fraud, forgery, financial elder abuse. Noah had coordinated with Donna Briggs's attorney in Dayton, and the 2 cases together painted a picture that no jury would have difficulty reading. Craig's business partner, upon learning the full scope of what the title objection meant for their shared liability, had already retained separate counsel and was cooperating. Sylvie called me on a Tuesday morning. I answered on the second ring. She didn't say anything for a long moment. I could hear her breathing, could hear the particular quality of silence that meant she was holding something heavy and didn't yet know how to set it down. "Dad," she finally said, and her voice broke on that single word in a way that told me everything, that she knew, that she was sorry, that she had been lied to and had only just understood the full shape of it. "I know, baby," I said. "I didn't. I know. He told me you called. He said, 'Sylvie.' I said her name the way I used to when she was small and frightened and needed the fear interrupted. I know. It wasn't you." "It was never you," she cried then. "The real kind, not the polite kind." And I sat in my beige apartment and let her, because sometimes the most important thing a father can do is simply stay on the line. We talked for an hour and 40 minutes. It was the best conversation I'd had in 4 years. The recovered assets funded something June had always wanted: a small community recovery space. Not a clinical facility, nothing institutional. Just a warm room with good coffee and folding chairs and people willing to sit in a circle and tell the truth about their lives. We called it the June Whitmore Center. Noah sat on the board. Donna Briggs drove up from Dayton for the opening and shook my hand and held it for a moment longer than a handshake requires, the way people do when a handshake is standing in for something that doesn't have a name. And in the small park beside the center, a piece of land at the corner of Maple and Route 9 that I donated to the city on one condition: there is a bench. Simple wood, simple iron. A small plaque on the back that reads, "For June Whitmore, who made up the good sheets, who always made enough for 3, who saw something in people before they could see it in themselves." I sit on that bench every morning, black coffee. Thermos, the particular quiet of early morning before the world gets loud. And I want to leave you with what I've learned, not as a man who won something, but as a man who almost lost everything and somehow didn't. Grief is not an excuse, but it is a reason, and reasons deserve to be understood before they're judged. The people who betray you are counting on you to stay broken. The most powerful thing you can do is heal anyway. Sobriety saved me from myself, and that left me standing, clear-eyed and present, when everything else arrived. And the stranger who showed up in that parking lot, he wasn't a miracle. He was the return on an investment made in 1997 by a woman with good sheets and a generous heart. Proof that every decent thing you do for another human being goes somewhere, even when you can't see where. Especially when you can't see where. Craig Weston sits in a courtroom now. Every now and then, Sylvie comes and sits beside me, brings her own coffee, doesn't say much, just sits, and we watch the light come up over the park together. Her mother would have loved this bench so much, for everyone who ever did the hardest thing and looked up to find nobody there. Keep going. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And share this with someone who needs to hear it. And as always, thank you for being a part of this community. I will see you on the next one.